invite Mr. Marcus Tomlinson for addressing the session. Mr. Marcus is the founder of Mindset Revolution and is a very passionate and influential British human rights activist who regularly speaks on human rights at top government and political party events. He is frequently invited as a keynote speaker to lobby and influence policy and decision makers on human rights issues at international conferences and events. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Marcus Tomlinson.
That's good, thank you. Many people I meet are looking for something more, maybe to be more successful, a better work-life balance. Most people I meet are simply looking to be happy, healthy, maybe wealthy, hopefully wise. Now, all of these people are telling themselves and everyone around them stories every single minute of every day of who they are, of what they're capable of what they can do, and often what they can't do. Now, if these stories are good stories, if they're positive stories, if they are truly wonderful stories, then all is well. But if they're not, then the stories must change. I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me here today, CPSD, the Minister, and when given this precious opportunity to share a few minutes with you today, I wrote a speech. Then I wrote another one, then another, and after I got to 5 or 6, I kept throwing them away because I thought, what can I achieve in these few minutes? Shall I revisit what we know is going on in Kashmir, especially over the last 100 days? Shall I highlight the atrocities and the wrongs? And I thought, no, what I'd like to do this morning is to just speak to you as individuals. Can I just ask very quickly, are there any fathers here today? Any fathers? Yeah. Any sons? Yeah. Any mothers? Any daughters? And I'm a father. I'm a son. And I want to speak to you as a fellow human being and share with you some stories that might motivate you in this room for today and what happens tomorrow, to keep us empowered and inspired on changing things, not just in Kashmir and Pakistan, but around the world. Because when I work with people, I'm the founder of this thing called the Mindset Revolution, and I passionately believe we are what we think. What we think about the most is what manifests in our lives on a daily basis. If we think about positive things, then the chances are more positive things are attracted towards us. And that's what we create in our environment. And equally, if we think about the negative, the things we can't do, then that seems to happen. I give seminars on how the brain really works. And if I had time today, I'd do one of those for you now and talk about what is it. Have you noticed how often what we're thinking about the most, the brain almost has a magical quality of attracting it to us. So when we're thinking about making changes fundamentally, let's start with ourselves. And to do that, I want to tell 3 very quick stories. And I'll explain at the end of those 3 stories about 3 little boys, why they are relevant to each other. Let's start with boy A. Boy A went one morning on a bus into the town where he lives. It was a beautiful day like any other. The sun was shining and he was gleefully staring out of the window, looking forward to shopping with his mother. And just as they approached a junction on this perfectly ordinary day, bang! The car bomb went off. His very foundation of everything he knew and understood was shaken. Just ahead of the bus, there was flames and smoke, and there was just mayhem, as you can imagine. Interestingly, the bus window didn't break, and the little boy looked out upon the scene, and almost bizarrely, his eye was drawn to a dismembered foot just ahead of where he was. But what caught his mind was not the the bizarre situation. It was how clean the white plimsoll, the trainer, was. It was pristine white in amongst all of the things around it. It's amazing what the brain does. The second story is Boy B. Boy B is walking home from school. He's about 6.5, 7 years of age. A normal day. He's actually holding hands with his friend. And as they walk down the street, very happy, they've had a good day at school, they encounter a group of larger, older boys. And these larger, older boys decide that they shouldn't be friends. They shouldn't be holding hands. They shouldn't talk to each other. It turns out, apparently, they were from different religions. And they were so angry, they got the friend of Boy B to say, you know, you should not only not be a friend, but you should hate him. And they were so strong, they encouraged this other boy to pick up some stones and throw them at Boy B. And Boy B stood there crying. Moments ago, he was walking down the street, happy. And then he was being stoned by his friend. The third of the three stories, Boy C, was living in his little flat in a city on the top of a 4-story building. And one night, his mother was very frequently away, by the way. She would go out and leave him on his own. He was about 7 years of age. And on this particular night, someone had planted a bomb, a firebomb, on the ground floor. And the bomb went off, and the police, the ambulance was called, the army was called. And again, remarkably, the memory for this young boy was being taken out of that situation and being put in the back of an army Land Rover, which was kind of cool because he liked the army. And he was carried off to a hotel where he was given a drink with a beautiful red cherry on top. He'd never had one before. His memories were interesting. So why am I telling you these three stories? Well, actually, there weren't three little boys. They were all one little boy. And that little boy was me. By the age of 7, because I lived in a place called Northern Ireland, where we had something called the Troubles. You just love that word, the Troubles. Not war, not mayhem, not destruction. By the age of 7, I'd been blown up twice and stoned. And because of that, funnily enough, I didn't like Irish people. I thought all Irish people, every man, woman and child, was wrong and bad and evil, because they kind of tried to have a go at me just because I was English. And so I grew up and I carried this anger around with me. And I would share it with everyone I met and say, oh, these Irish, what are they like? How dare they do that to a young child and all the other people? And in that time, in the early 70s, you could even walk around and find so many people who would share in your anger over every single Irishman, woman and child. You could even see in little hotels, cars that would say things like, in this order, no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. And I hung on to that anger. Because why shouldn't I? I should be bitter, I should be resentful. And I carried that and shared it in this, what I call the luggage of life, 2 invisible bags that I would carry everywhere and get people to equally feel bad with me. Until one day, I was so bad, I carried this into my adult life. And I would tell people how angry I was, so much so that it affected my health. And my doctor, by the time I was 30, I was diagnosed with stress and anxiety, and I would drink too much, and I would just get so angry at the world that I was killing myself. And he said to me, you must change. You must adopt a different stance, which was very forward-thinking. He introduced me to something called personal development, which I thought was Californian nonsense. He talked about a thing called mindset, which I embraced. And I embraced it so much that I, at 33, went to university to study psychology. And I absorbed this information and started to read. And I read, and I read, and I read, and I began to grow. And I stopped seeing the difference. And I eventually realized how ludicrous it was that I was thinking that every single Irish person was this 1 or 2 or 3 or a handful of individuals who had the cause of their own. And it started to change my view of the world. And I wanted to share this with you today to say that there is so much gone wrong in the past. And if we spend time after time after time revisiting it, we all know what's gone wrong. But the takeaway I'd like to give you is, what can we fundamentally change within ourselves, within the mindset, and focus on a vision for the future? I need longer arms. I think it says get off. So in terms of a mindset, it's about having a vision of what we can achieve, of what the future really looks like, and burning that vision into the heart and mind of every Kashmiri, every Pakistani, every person on the planet to say we want a better way of doing things, that what is happening is not acceptable. Lord McNair spoke about the Universal Declaration, which I think should be in every school in the land, on the planet, to give us an understanding of right, proper and fair rules that we can adopt for ourselves and for other people. So when we think of this vision, not just some of the fine words we hear today, but to really create a future and live into it. I often talk about vision and visualization. And there was a gentleman, we all heard of Arnold Schwarzenegger. He does the odd film. And in 1976, he was the world's greatest bodybuilder. He was a huge, and still is, a formidable figure of a man. He wasn't known for his acting then, and he was being interviewed by a New York Times journalist. And actually, Mr. Schwarzenegger had just had a go at a film. It was called Stay Hungry. It was awful. Don't watch it. Even he admits it was terrible. So he's a big, bulky man. His accent is quite difficult to understand, even more so then. And the New York Times journalist says, okay, Mr. Schwarzenegger, you have been the world's greatest bodybuilder, what's next? And he looked him in the eye and he said, I'm going to be the world's best paid actor. And the journalist didn't want to laugh. He didn't want to be impolite because the man could hardly speak, you could hardly understand him. And he was a bit of a meathead, he wasn't known for acting. He said, okay, Mr. Schwarzenegger, how are you going to do that? He said, I'm going to do exactly what I did to become the world's greatest bodybuilder. I'm going to create a vision of what I look like, of how I stand, of how other people look at me. And then I'm going to do everything in my power to live into that vision until it becomes a reality. And the rest, of course, is history. Now, that's what I encourage and implore you to think about doing. What's your individual vision of the future? What is it, the difference that you and I can make on an individual basis as well as collectively to create the future where atrocities that are happening now don't happen? A vision of a Kashmir that's independent and self-governed rather than focusing on what's happening now. So I've been obviously asked to cut it short, but I implore you that we all have an individual responsibility first to tell the best story of who we are and hope that that inspires other people to tell the best story of who they are and create a truly positive vision for ourselves and the future of everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me here today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tomlinson, and it was really wonderful to listen to those stories of those three boys and knowing that what mind can do. We sincerely hope that the world realizes that children from Kashmir need to have lovely memories as well when they are grown up, you know. So thank you very much.